At our anniversary dinner, I stepped away to pay the bill. On my way back, I heard her aunt say, "Does he still think you love him?" My wife smirked and said, "Of course, his credit's great and he pays for everything. Why would I leave?" I sat down, finished my drink, and drove us home in silence. 2 days later, she tried to swipe my card and nothing worked. Her aunt called me crying. "Before we start, I just want to say thank you for being here. It means the world. But take a look at this. Only 8% of people watching are subscribed. If you enjoy these stories and want to support more of them, just one click makes a huge difference." You ever have one of those moments where everything suddenly clicks? Like all these random puzzle pieces you've been staring at for years suddenly form a clear picture? That was me last week at Castello's, an overpriced Italian place my wife Sarah insisted on for our 5th anniversary. Let me back up. I'm 34, run my own construction company that's finally taking off after years of 80-hour weeks and financial stress. Sarah's 32, comes from money but doesn't work, hasn't held a job since we got married. When we met, I was still struggling, living in a studio apartment and driving a truck that was more rust than metal. Sarah was different then, or seemed it. She was working as a gallery assistant, had her own apartment, subsidized by her parents, and talked about becoming an art curator someday. I fell hard. She was beautiful, cultured, seemed to see potential in me that others missed. When she moved in with me 6 months later, her parents nearly had a collective stroke. Her dad actually asked if I could provide documentation of my income and credit score. Should have been a red flag, but I was so determined to prove myself worthy of her that I handed it all over without question. We got married a year later, small ceremony, because I was putting every spare dollar into growing my business. Sarah wasn't thrilled about that, but said she understood it was an investment in our future. After the wedding, things shifted. First, she quit her gallery job, said she wanted to focus on supporting my business aspirations. Sounds nice, except her version of support was mainly social networking with potential clients at country clubs her family belonged to. Then came the gradual lifestyle upgrades. "Babe, we need to move to a better neighborhood if you want to be taken seriously. These clients won't respect you in that suit. You need something tailored. We should join the lake club. That's where all the real deals happen." Each suggestion came with the same implied message. To succeed, I needed to spend more. And since my business was actually growing, I rationalized the expenses. Maybe she was right. Maybe the $200 client dinners and the lakefront rental were helping my image. The lines between business expenses and keeping my wife happy blurred completely. There were moments that nagged at me, like how Sarah's interest in my day directly correlated with whether I'd closed a big deal, or how she'd disappear for girls' trips when cash was tight but would become the doting wife when a project paid out, or how her aunt, Lisa, a sharp-tongued woman who'd married and divorced 3 wealthy men, always referred to me as Sarah's builder instead of my name. Still, I wasn't completely naive. About 2 years ago, I started keeping certain financial moves to myself. The business was doing well enough that I could divert some profits into separate investments without affecting our lifestyle. I told myself it was just smart planning, diversification, or whatever. Deep down, I was building a safety net. Back to Castello's. Our anniversary dinner was Sarah's pick, of course. I'd suggested something more meaningful, the pizza place where we had our first date. She shot that down immediately. "God, Jake, we can't celebrate at some dive. What would people think?" I didn't bother asking which people would be monitoring our anniversary dinner. The evening was pleasant enough. Sarah was in a good mood because I'd landed a contract for 6 luxury townhouses the week before. When the check came, I excused myself to pay at the front desk, a habit I've had ever since my card was skimmed at a restaurant years ago. On my way back, I had to pass behind a decorative partition where Sarah was sitting with Lisa, who'd coincidentally been dining with friends at the restaurant and stopped by our table earlier. I paused when I heard my name. "Does Jake still think you love him?" Lisa's voice slightly slurred from whatever she'd been drinking. There was a pause and then Sarah's response, clear as day with a distinct smirk in her voice. "Of course, his credit's great and he pays for everything. Why would I leave?" They both laughed. Lisa said something else I couldn't quite catch and Sarah replied, Well, Mom and Dad were right about one thing. Marrying a tradesman means he'll always be working too hard to notice what I'm doing. I stood there, completely still. It wasn't even shock I felt, more like confirmation. Like finally getting a diagnosis for symptoms you've been ignoring. I walked back to the table, sat down, and finished my drink while they wrapped up their conversation. Sarah rejoined me, completely oblivious to what I'd overheard. I drove us home in silence. "You're quiet," she said as we pulled into our driveway. "Just tired," I replied. "Big project starting tomorrow." She nodded, instantly losing interest once she knew it wasn't about her. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I made a plan. The next morning, I called my bank and credit card companies before Sarah woke up. I explained I needed to remove my wife as an authorized user due to suspected fraudulent activity. By noon, I'd contacted my lawyer, my accountant, and my business partner. By evening, I'd moved half our joint savings to my separate account and frozen the rest. Sarah didn't notice anything amiss that first day. She was busy with her usual routine: Pilates, lunch with friends, shopping. I went to work like normal. Kissed her goodbye, told her I loved her. It felt strange how easy it was to pretend. 2 days later, Sarah tried to pay for a spa day with her friends using my American Express. The card was declined. She tried another card. Same result. She called me, voice tight with controlled anger. "There's something wrong with the cards." That's strange," I said, sounding appropriately concerned. "I paid all the bills last week. What are you trying to buy?" "Just lunch," she lied. I was staring at the real-time notification from the spa for $900. "Can you call the bank?" "I'm in meetings all day, but I'll check tonight," I promised. "Use your own card for now." Silence on her end. We both knew she kept her personal credit card for emergencies only. It had a low limit because she had no income to support it. "Fine," she finally said and hung up. 3 hours later, my phone exploded with texts from Sarah demanding to know what was going on. She'd tried to access our joint checking account and discovered it was frozen. I didn't respond. I was legitimately in a meeting with clients. When I got out, I had 27 missed calls and a voicemail from my lawyer confirming he'd filed the preliminary divorce paperwork. I drove home, half expecting Sarah to be there waiting with fury and accusations. The house was empty. According to our doorbell camera, she'd left with 3 suitcases 2 hours earlier. Later, I learned she'd gone straight to her parents' house. The next morning, Lisa called me. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. "Jake?" Her voice was thick, like she'd been crying. "What have you done?" "What did Sarah tell you?" I countered. "That you've lost your mind, frozen all the accounts, cut off her cards, some kind of male midlife crisis." Lisa's voice had the practiced outrage of someone accustomed to taking her niece's side. "Interesting interpretation," I said. "Did she happen to mention our anniversary dinner, your little chat at the table?" Silence, then a small shaky inhale. "You heard?" "Every word." "Jake, we were just talking. Women say things sometimes. It doesn't mean." "Save it, Lisa. I've already filed for divorce. Sarah can contact my lawyer if she needs anything." "You're making a terrible mistake," she said, but the conviction had drained from her voice. "Sarah loves you. She's just complicated." "No, she's actually very simple once you understand her motivations. Tell her I said thanks for the clarity." I hung up. Then I blocked both their numbers. Over the next week, the situation escalated exactly as I'd expected. Sarah's father called my business partner, threatening to ruin us if I didn't fix this nonsense immediately. I received a letter from a divorce attorney known for being particularly aggressive with wealthy clients, demanding immediate restoration of Mrs. Harrison's standard of living. Sarah even sent a mutual friend to my office, hoping to appeal to my emotions. What none of them knew was how prepared I was for this moment. When my lawyer counterfinancialed with evidence of Sarah's spending patterns, documentation of her contributions, or lack thereof, to our household and my business, and records of large transfers to her personal account that she'd hidden from me, the tone changed dramatically. Her attorney requested a meeting. In a conference room downtown, I finally saw Sarah again. She looked immaculate as always, but her eyes had a calculating hardness I now recognized all too well. "This is unnecessary," she said, barely looking at me. "We can fix this without lawyers." "I prefer having witnesses to our conversations moving forward," I replied. Her attorney cleared his throat. My client is willing to consider a fair settlement that acknowledges her contributions to your success. My lawyer, Patricia, a no-nonsense woman who'd seen it all, slid a document across the table. My client has already outlined what he considers fair. Given the short duration of the marriage and documented evidence of financial impropriety, we believe this is more than generous. Sarah snatched up the paper. As she read, her face went from confident to confused to outraged. The settlement offered her the cars in her name, the contents of her personal accounts, and a one-time payment that was a fraction of what she clearly expected. "This is insulting," she hissed. 5 years of my life, and you offer me less than I had before we met? That's when I finally spoke directly to her. Before we met, you at least had a job and the respect of working for something. Consider this an opportunity to find that person again. Your business would be nothing without my connections, she snapped. Actually, I've analyzed our client acquisition data, I said calmly. Less than 8% came through your network, and those clients had the lowest retention rate. But thanks for your concern about my business. Her lawyer whispered something to her. She shook her head vehemently. We'll need time to consider this offer, he said diplomatically. Of course, Patricia replied, but I should mention that my client has extensive documentation regarding Mrs. Harrison's spending habits, including some interesting purchases during weekends she claimed to be with family. Sarah's head snapped up. What does that mean? I hadn't told my lawyer everything, but she was smart enough to recognize the patterns in Sarah's credit card statements. Weekend charges in locations that matched social media posts from a certain male friend of hers. It means, I said, gathering my things, that fighting this will be more expensive and embarrassing than accepting it. Your call. As we left, Sarah called after me. You wouldn't even have met the Brightons without me, or the Winstons. You think you did this all yourself? I turned back. You know what's funny? I always gave you credit for believing in me from the beginning. Now I realize you just saw me as a stock to invest in. Your mistake was selling too early. 3 weeks later, Sarah signed the settlement agreement. She got less than 15% of our assets, which was still enough for her to live comfortably if she was careful. I kept the house, the business, and most importantly, my peace of mind. Lisa texted me from a new number the day after the settlement was finalized. You were smarter than the others. She miscalculated. I didn't need to ask what she meant by the others. Instead, I simply replied, no. Her biggest mistake was thinking money was all I cared about. It's been 2 months now. The business is thriving. Turns out clients prefer working directly with me rather than through Sarah's networking. I've heard through mutual friends that she's living in her parents' guest house, telling anyone who'll listen that I had a breakdown and ruined a perfect marriage. Maybe in her mind, it was perfect. She got the lifestyle she wanted, and all it cost was pretending to love someone. But here's what Sarah never understood. I didn't build a successful business by being naive or sentimental. I built it by paying attention to details, by recognizing patterns, and by knowing when to cut my losses. I applied those same principles to our marriage. I just wish I'd done it sooner. Last week, I donated all of Sarah's remaining things to a women's shelter. As I was dropping off the last box, one of the volunteer coordinators asked if I'd consider being on their fundraising committee. They needed help planning a renovation for their facilities. We're getting coffee next week to discuss it. No fancy restaurant, just 2 people talking about something that matters. And for the first time in years, I'm looking forward to a conversation that has nothing to do with status, money, or keeping up appearances. Turns out, clarity is the most expensive thing I've ever paid for, and worth every penny.